gamers, gals, non-binary pals, drama frogs alike. We're going to be talking about the most recent tournament series that just wrapped up today, depending on when you're watching this video. Technically yesterday. We're going to be talking about the MCS Week 1 wrap-up. But what were they cooking? We're going to talk about decks. We're going to talk about results. We're going to talk about deck breakdowns. And we're going to talk about the spice. Ooh la la. So let's get right into it. For those of you who don't know, what is the MCS? It is a weekly tournament series for Master Duel that is hosted by MBT, Duel Logs, yugioh Pro Deck, and TCG Player. It is a best of 1 Swiss event with a best of 3 top cut. Finally, we have best of 3 at Master Duel. God bless. Now, there is a $1,000 prize pool for each weekly event, and the people who top/win the event, I'm not 100% sure, they are qualified to enter a finals tournament for a prize pool of $10,000, which is a lot of money, and I need to pay for a car, so I'm gonna probably try and win one of these. And it is the first seriously promoted and supported tournament since DK's 1K tournaments that he used to do, and yeah, it's gonna be super poggers. So let's talk about competitors. There were a lot of them. We had Gage playing, we had like Sophie, we had like Jesse Khan, we had pro players from all sorts of the sides of the moon, we had a lot of Yugi tubers, we also had a lot of streamers and VTubers like Asagi Ame and Leah, who basically got in through nepotism. Thanks, Duel Logs. It was really cool to see that this tournament was just, you know, populated by a bunch of people who not only knew what they were doing, but also just a lot of content creators, which is super poggers. Duel Logs, get me in next time. I have to get into one of these tournaments. I can. Poggers. Let's talk about decks that were expected to do super duper well. So first one, obviously Sword Soul Tenny. You see it on Master Duel Ladder a lot. It is the most annoying deck to play against because it just either breaks your board or sets up a super annoying board with like 2 negates plus a pop with stuff like Baron, Blackout, Chi-Xiao, Evil Long One, etc. It's really strong, it's really consistent, and it has the ability to both set up a combo board and crack boards. So ideally, it is the most expected deck for it to just come out on top, especially because it has Protoss. And oh my god, Protoss is fucking broken. Next up, we've got Mathmech. Mathmech was a deck that kind of didn't really do well in the TCG because of tier limit, but because tier limit doesn't exist yet, it's actually a lot better because we now have Circular. And because it's extremely consistent, it can push through hand traps. We don't talk about Nibiru though. And it has a lot of cool disruption tools that a lot of decks just aren't really prepared for. Stuff like Laplation, stuff like Super Factorial attached to Diameter for the negate. It's just really good. It's just really good deck. It doesn't really have any problems going for OTK lines. It's just, you know, an extremely solid deck. And third is Branded Despia. This deck didn't really see as much play anymore, mainly just because more people are like pivoting to like Sword Soul and just make Protoss called Dark or Light and like you win the game. But it's still a really good mid-range deck that has, you know, great game because Branded in red summon Guardian Chimera or Double Masquerade is kind of saucy. So let's talk about decks that are expected to not really do so well. And one of them is, unfortunately, Runic Stun. Runic Stun is a lot less consistent in tournament settings and even worse in best of 3 top cuts. When you look at a deck like Runic Stun or Oops All Spells / Striker Runic, you kind of have to look at it in the lens of whether you're playing that in a tournament or a ladder. In a ladder, if you're able to just infinitely farm games and maintain a high enough win percentage, or just have a bunch of people, you know, just auto concede to you because they don't want to play against you, Runic Stun is much better in those sort of scenarios. However, Runic in, say, a tournament setting without, you know, a really centralized archetypes to really support it, back it up like something like Sprite in the TCG, unfortunately, Runic is just not as impactful as you would want it to think. Additionally, Wombo combo decks are not exactly amazing. They are way less forgiving than stuff like, you know, Runic Stun, because as you kind of saw on the previous slide, all those decks play like 9 to 15 hand traps. And guess what? Emancipator right now loses to like 1 or 2 hand traps. Windups lose to like 1 or 2 hand traps. A lot of decks just kind of lose to like 2 to 3 hand traps plus starter, and that's just kind of the society that we are living in. And third, we have Gimmick OTK decks. They're just not really good. They were okay on ladder, but they're just a much worse version of, you know, Runic or even combo decks. You could theoretically play a Gimmick OTK deck with like a bunch of Kaijus and like a bunch of Lightning Storm, whatever, to sort of metagame, but unfortunately, those decks that are in the expected pile that we mentioned earlier have a really easy time dealing with stuff like Numeron Network. Who would have guessed that all you need is a single Sword Soul Blackout to just win the game? So, when we look at the deck attendance, you see that our data sort of matches up pretty similarly. We have 60 Sword Soul players out of 256, which is a lot. 47 Math Mech, again, pretty expected result. And the rest gets pretty diversified into our portfolio. We have 11 Striker players. We got 10 Branded Despia. This is a lot less than I expected, honestly. I honestly expected Branded Despia to be way more popular, but on the other hand, Branded Despia is really, really expensive. Emancipator, it's a pretty powerful combo deck. Runic Stun, who would have guessed? Good deck. Tread Brigade, mid-range deck. Labyrinth, mid-range deck. Virtual World, mid-range deck. Shout out to Leah. Bird Up, and Blunder, and other. So, how did this pie graph convert into top 16? Well, let's just say we might have a tier 0 format on our hands. We had 8 Math Mech, 2 Sword Soul, 2 Branded Despia, 1 Branded Thunder Dragon. I don't know where the fuck that came in. 2 Emancipator, and 1 Subterror. How did Subterror get in here? No fucking clue. We need to ban Subterror. That is the take I'm getting from this. Let's break it down. Math Mech dominated. Even in decks that weren't playing pure Math Mech, or playing a mix of hybrid, or only playing like 1 circular, or 1 like addition or whatever, it was definitely the most popular deck in terms of representation and top cut representation. It was absolutely insane. Additionally, despite much lower representation, branded decks converted extremely well. There were a bunch of branded piles. The Thunder Dragon list is definitely the funniest. And finally, unfortunately, Sword Soul flopped. This is something that I did have in the back of my mind that I think would happen, but this sort of happens at the beginning of any sort of tournament series, where if there's a clearly defined best deck, a lot of people are going to be maining lots of hate for it. So either that deck is just going to be completely slaughtered for the first couple of events because everybody's maining hate for it, or it's going to be just that good, say a la Tier Limit, that is just doesn't care and it's just going to destroy every tournament forever. Unfortunately, it can't really break Math Mech boards going second. There was a ton of main deck hate and preparedness for the deck, and additionally, just because there were so many Sword Soul players, statistically, a lot of them just played against each other. There were probably a lot of Sword Soul mirror matches that unfortunately a lot of them just kind of knocked each other out. So let's look at some funny deck lists. So this is a pretty standard Math Mech list. You know, we got a bunch of fucking hand traps, we got a goddamn token collector in here, you know, we got the Math Mech package. This is sort of like the ideal best deck coming into this tournament outside of Sword Soul. Then we have Hasher Brown, who bubbled, unfortunately. Unfortunately, he got cut off in tiebreakers because there were a lot of X2s. But this deck is super, super interesting. This is just a very, very powerful deck to go against stuff like Math Mech, Sword Soul especially. I think in his tournament report on Twitter, he basically played against like 5 Sword Soul players in a row and beat all of them. It was insane. Finally, we have the winner, Tyrese1103, playing the worst branded list I had ever seen. What is this list? Who let this man cook? 1 Cosmic Cyclone, 1 Duster in the main, 2 Allure of Darkness, 1 Nibiru, 2 Kaijus, and Super Poly in the main. This man was on some sauce. Big props to the guy for winning the whole event with honestly just a very, very solid list. So what are some takeaways that we can take away from all of this? In a best of 1 Swiss format, metagaming for the best decks in the main deck is a must. You have to be playing stuff like Nibiru. You have to be playing a shit ton of hand traps. You have to be playing stuff like Token Collector if you do not want to lose to stuff like Sword Soul, if you don't want to lose to stuff like Math Mech, etc. That's just the reality of it. Unfortunately, best of 1 format is sort of here to stay, and we just kind of have to deal with it. Second, bringing the best deck is not always the best idea. On one hand, you're bringing obviously the best deck, and you're gonna have the best chance of winning because, you know, it's the best deck, it's the best matchup spread, whatever. On the other hand, you're also going to be losing to a lot of stuff that people are just teching in for you. You're going to be losing to Nibiru if you're playing Math Mech. You're going to be losing to Kaijus if you're playing Sword Soul, blah, 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 blah. You get the idea. This can be alleviated by you just saying, I will draw the nuts and win the coin toss. On the other hand, weigh your options and don't automatically assume that you have to play the best deck in order to do well at these tournaments. And third, decks that are good on ladder are far, far worse in the tournament bracket. I'm sorry, Subterra players. I'm sorry, Runic Stun players, but this is not your time. Please go back to the kitchen. We need you to continue cooking because this shit is raw. And that's it. Thank you guys for watching this video. Subscribe. Stevie Blunder, Real, YouTube, Twitch. Hit the follow button. Give me subs. I want to eat Popeye's chicken. And follow me on Twitter, twitter.com, StevieBlunder__ for all the worst memes imaginable. And that's going to be it for this video. See ya.